Hello, I am not sure, but I think I may have already produced a video uh, on this particular item. But I want to give a big shout out to Joe Flowers, who I met at the Georgia Bushcraft Fall event. Joe is with, or is, Global Bushcrafting, and he was talking at the event. I'm sorry, I'm kind of stuffy. He was talking at the event about how that the indigenous people in South America utilize something, a resource that's all around the world, and that's plastic bags, garbage, basically. I did a video a while back at the Turkey Foot, I'm sorry, not Turkey Foot, Paragon Craney Road. These places begin to run together after a while. Where I actually just walked around and picked up garbage, trash, and there was just abundance of resources in that. In fact, a little small aluminum cook pot that I used this morning to make heat the water to make coffee with this morning. So going back, I wanted to show this because this is something relatively simple, and while it's not necessarily a survival type thing, around the homestead, I guess you could use it. And there's 100 videos out there on how to turn bottles, which, by the way, I did find this one in the woods. If this were a survival situation, it would be more valuable to me as a container than it would be cut up and make cordage. But the thing is, piece of wood, I took this off of a pallet somewhere, and it's been sanded up nice and smooth. A couple of bolts, some wing nuts, some washers, and a blade out of a tiny little X-Acto knife. And I'm going to give a close-up of this in just a moment. But what I'm really wanting to point out here is that the abundance of materials in nature today, because of people's just total lack of respect, can be recycled and reused to our advantage. This particular method of making cordage by recycling plastic is really neat because it can make lashings and things that are permanent, for that matter. And once you get something lashed up, maybe some poles for a lean-to shelter or something you're building, you apply a little bit of heat, this stuff draws up because of the natures of the plastic, and it then becomes permanent in that position. So let me readjust the camera and we'll get started. I'll show you how this thing works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up to cut a fairly wide strip of plastic. And I carry this thing around in my van. Those of you that follow us know that's home sweet home. We live in the van full time. But I carry it around with the blade turned in, the sharp edge of the blade turned in to where it can't get into much of anything. And to adjust the thickness of the material, all you have to do is use these fender washers to say I want to cut a skinny little sliver, a not so skinny, or a big fat one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to go about midway right here. Take my X-Acto knife, or not X-Acto knife, take my, I guess this was just a handy knife, one of those little slide it up and click off the blade type knives that you buy at any of the hardware stores. Now, it's important to get the same number of washers on each side, because if you don't, these blades are designed to break, and that's exactly what they will do. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Oh, come on. There you go, 4. So all I want to do is I want to slide the blade in there and then tighten up the wing nuts. It's just that easy to change the thickness of the pieces you want to use. Now, I suppose that, we're going to go out on a limb here and say, hey, if you were in a survival situation, you might not have a razor blade. You might be able to find a few things to kind of hook this up with. Well, you could stick your knife blade in there. It would work just as well. Put your knife blade on the back side. Now, this is what the setup looks like, and I'm hoping you can see that. There's smoke drifting through, messing with the autofocus on the camera. Cooking a little beans for later. The blade is turned outward because what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the bottom off this bottle and then I'm going to start spinning it. But right now, give me just a minute to lash this down to my table in such a way that it's easier to work with. All right, so I cut the bottom off of the bottle, and I was going to show it to you, but the wind took it away from me. So what I have is I have the bottle without a bottom, and what I'm going to do is just very carefully put it right there and get it started. Now I want to hold it, get my arm out of the way. I want to hold it against the washers and against the board as I get it started. And then once I get it started, there'll be a little piece that comes out right there. So now you're going to pull on that piece. And you're going to let the bottle kind of turn itself, because the biggest thing you're going to focus on is keeping the bottle against the board so your strip is the same width. And I apologize, the sun's moving the tarp and probably making all kinds of shadows on the video. But all you're going to do is just pull, and you use it as cordage. You'll find it holds up just as well. All right. And if your bottom line starts to waver, bring the bottle up and to you a little bit so that you can hold it right against the board, just like that. And that's how this works. You're just got an adjustable height cutter. And all you're doing is pulling this plastic through that cutter. So I'm going to back off for a second. I know you don't want to sit here and watch me do all this, and then we'll play with some cordage. Welcome back. I didn't cut all the bottle because, as I said before, when you start getting to the portion of the bottle that's shaped and curved, the plastic is tougher because it's been injected into a mold, and so it's a little harder there. Plus the ridges cutting through them, it just doesn't produce good cordage. So what I ended up with is about 18 feet of good usable cordage, and I'm going to find a couple of sticks, lash them together, and try to get a little heat on it so you can see what I'm saying about it being thermoplastic and setting once you use it. Change of scenery. What I've done is I've taken the cordage, which, by the way, let me repeat, I got about 18 feet of cordage out of that jug, and I've done just a classic, square lashing with 2 sticks. And really, it's not cordage in that common sense. It takes a little bit of practice to kind of figure out how to tie knots in it. You don't have to be extremely neat, but it is done like a normal square lashing. What I'm hoping here is the wind's going to cooperate. It's kind of variable, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a little heat, maybe. We don't want to melt it as such, but all we want to do is take advantage of the thermoplastic, or the characteristics of the thermoplastic, and that it will draw up and tighten upon itself with the addition of the heat. And I guess I should have made a proper torch to actually do this with, but I think you're going to see the results here anyway. I'll tell you what, we'll just do this for a moment. That's some beans that I put on that's been kind of simmering most all day. Going to be a good meal tonight. And all I'm doing again is getting a little heat. You can see that the plastic has changed just a little bit. I hope you can see it on the camera. And it's drawing tighter. It's not as, the strip is not as wide. So I'm going to give that a second to cool. And you can see it's tightened that joint up just a little bit. Try just a little more heat. Again, if I were building a shelter or something of this nature, I would take some cattails or make some kind of a torch, something that I could apply heat on the structure directly. It's just this is pretty convenient. Okay, so you can see it's changed the plastic. The plastic is tightening up. And if I let it cool, you can see that it has already tightened that joint a good bit. I was sloppy to start with. I wanted you to see exactly how much it would tighten that joint. And I'm going to say that if you had a joint that was that reasonably tight against another one, you'd have something pretty solid. But when you consider it's been made out of trash, I think that's a pretty good outcome. So once again, a little shout out to Joe Flowers with Global Bushcrafting. He shared how the indigenous people in South America utilize the old Walmart, Kroger, plastic sort of shopping bags to twist and draw out and make cordage. Here's another way. I know there's thousands of ways to do it on YouTube. I've seen some really neat looking cutters made out of angle iron and slots and notches, but it's just one more way. The only thing I can tell you after that is I'm going to have some good beans for supper tonight. You guys need to get out, be safe, and go adventure.